Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Spooney Scrapbook. I'm Mike Kenichi. Of course, that's Coach John Sponheimer. And, Coach, thank you for coming on as always. And big week for you, big Thanksgiving game, which I want to get into a little. But before we do, Coach, I wanted to ask you, we're both fellow Yankees fans, and I really wanted to get your take. I didn't get to talk to you after the horrible series they had against Houston. But what is your feelings about the Yankees? In my opinion, Coach, I was watching the old. I watched some playoff games from '99, and they you never should compare teams like that. But the state of the team is so different than those '90s teams. I mean, they seem to me like they just try to do everything with the home run, where in the '90s it was just work the count, do whatever you could to manufacture runs.
I agree with you there, Michael. They do rely, I think, a little bit too much on the home run. I mean, everybody enjoyed Judge's great year, and there were certainly some other guys who contributed very much in the home run issue. But when you get to the Fall Classic, whether it be the playoffs or the World Series, the pitching appears to get so much better, and it's harder to produce runs just by home runs at that point in time. And uh, they don't manufacture runs very well, and I think that hurts them as you get closer and closer to it, trying to achieve the World Championships at the series. So it was frustrating. It's still great to be a Yankee fan, but it's hard when they come up just a little bit short, and that's what has happened the last few years, obviously.
Yeah, it's just it's one thing. Listen, I think we all got spoiled with those '90s teams. I understand that, but the frustrating thing for me more than anything else is that it's like we keep seeing the same thing every year, where uh, they play like a team that has good pitching, and they just don't seem to ever get hits. And we always worry about their pitching staff, but honestly, the last few years, except for last year when Cole got lit up by the Red Sox, they've been losing these series because they're not hitting.
Right. I think, well, obviously, I think their bullpen had some real hassles. They had an all star pitcher in Holmes, and then all of a sudden there was really nothing from him the second half of the year, and I think uh, I think that there was just no reliability in the bullpen also, and teams rely so much on the ability on their bullpen as you get closer and closer to the playoff situation. So that was a real hassle also, I thought.
Right. So let me ask you, do you break the bank for Judge? What are your feelings on that? Do you sign him?
Whatever it takes, Mike. They've got
Yeah.
plenty of money. They're worth billions. Whatever it takes.
Yeah, I agree completely. So, Coach, let's talk a little bit about Thanksgiving. I wanted to ask you as a player, because you were a player at one time as well. Now, did you guys play Hamden on Thanksgiving when you played, or was it a different team? Or
No, I believe it's called the Green Bowl because both teams wore green uniforms. It was always played at Hampton High School, and the team who won the previous year would wear green uniforms, and the team who lost would wear their away whites. And I believe the Green Bowl started in 1960, and I played there in 62, 3, and 4. And it's going on ever since then. And I've had three sons also play for Notre Dame and play in the Green Bowl. It's a great rivalry. There's been some outstanding teams from both sides over the years, and some exceptional individual high school football players that played at both schools.
right. So let me ask you, as a player, I mean, how pumped up were you for that week of Hamden? I mean, was it exciting? And I mean, I believe back then the rivalries were really big on Thanksgiving. We know Derby and Ansonia had their rivalry, but a lot of these schools, their rivalries were Thanksgiving.
Absolutely, there was a tremendous rivalry. There'd be crowds anywhere ranging from 6, 7 thousand up to 10,000 for the Notre Dame Hamden game, and it really built as the season went on. And usually it was for the district league title, and which was New Haven schools, West Haven, Hamden, and Notre Dame. And so it really meant an awful lot to play in that game. And we were fortunate that in the 3 years that I played there, we won all three times. So that was something I was very happy to have in our in my high school history anyway.
Right. And that is a good rivalry, a very good rivalry, Hamden and Notre Dame. There's been some years where Notre Dame didn't necessarily have the most talent, and they pulled off the upset. And the same thing with Hamden as well. And I thought about a game in 2002 when I believe Notre Dame going into that game, only had about, I would say, one loss the whole year, and Hamden had three, and Hamden pulled off the upset. So that was always a great rivalry, and it didn't matter what the records were. Both teams were going to give their very best.
You are 100% correct on that, Mike.
Right. So, Coach, let me ask you, I'm going to talk about Naugatuck Ansonia, the one game that will always be memorable to me, and I'm sure you've seen so many, so you're going to give us some more. But I always think of that 1994 game, the overtime win that you guys got. It was 28-21. That was the year of Ron Tate, Phil Mrazek, Stephen Coughlin, all those guys. And I believe they had Edmonds for Naugatuck. He was a tremendous player. And I mean, that game went back and forth. And I think Naugatuck scored a late touchdown to tie it. So, I mean, that was just one of the best Thanksgiving games, I think, it's the best I ever saw Naugatuck and Ansonia in a Thanksgiving game.
I think I have to agree with you there, Michael. Naugatuck had beaten us the year before and won when they were the Double L state champs. We were 9-1 and didn't get to go to the playoffs. And we had beaten Naugatuck since 87, right up through 83, through 93. And that was Jack Hunt's first loss against Naugatuck. And Naugatuck had a great team coming back. Joey Edmonds was a fantastic player. And we were actually behind at halftime, I believe 7-6. We scored a couple of touchdowns in the third quarter to go ahead. And we had an 8-point lead with about 2 minutes to go in the game. And they ran a great play. They ran a crisscross in the backfield. And then the second back who got it pitched it out to Edmonds, who had drifted out of the backfield. And he ran about 60 yards for a touchdown. And then they made the 2-point extra point, and it really looked like momentum had swung 100% their way. And we won the toss. Actually, I believe they won the toss for the overtime because they went second. We came down and we scored in 3 plays. Ronald Tate scored on a sweep to the right side, and we kicked the extra point. And then we held them. And on the last play, Edmonds tried more or less a naked bootleg run past option, and Jason Zabina, who has 2 children playing for us right now, he made a great play and was able to grab Edmonds and start to bring him to the ground. Edmonds just threw the ball to anybody he could because he was going down, and it didn't make the end zone. And we had one of the great wins in the Ansonia history. The biggest crowd I've ever seen at Nolan Field. There were probably around 14,000 people, is what it said, anywhere from 12 to 14,000. It was really a special game, and they also did an interview after that game. I believe some of it was on national news because one of the Ansonia graduates was involved in broadcasting one of the national news channels, and there was a number of pickups around the country of that game. So it certainly ranks as, at least in my time, as the most spectacular Ansonia Naugatuck Thanksgiving game. And if there were any before that were better, I would really have to see it.
Yeah, and the thing is, too, Coach, that, in my opinion, that game was your state championship, because I knew whoever won that game, one of them was going to go to the playoffs, and they were going to pretty much win their state title game. So they needed that game to win it, and that ended like a 4-year drought of Ansonia not winning the state title. So, I mean, that was just such a unbelievable game. And I mean, again, that's the thing too. Just when you think momentum's on the other team's side, it could change like that. And you guys scored that touchdown right away. And I think that really relaxed a lot of the kids. They felt like, you know what, we got this touchdown. Now we got to just finish it.
Well, it certainly looked like momentum had truly swung the other way. As I said, they made the great run, and then they made the 2-point extra point. They just ran right up the middle, and it looked like everything was turning to the tide had turned to Naugatuck. But all of a sudden, it switched around. Our offense coordinator, Jim Delvo, began with some excellent plays to get us into the end zone, and then we were able to hold them. So things worked out well there.
Right. And I believe that was Jack's favorite holiday as well. He loved Thanksgiving. So he really took the Thanksgiving game very personal, and he always wanted to win that game as much as he could.
We used to claim that Jack owned Thanksgiving Day. It was one of the last words I said to him when he was in the hospital. His lifetime record against Naugatuck as a head coach and that included some great Naugatuck teams. He was 17-2.
Yeah.
To go 17-2 in a Thanksgiving Day rivalry is something I don't know if any coach in the history of Connecticut has ever done as well in a rivalry of that caliber. So we were very, very fortunate that we won some great games, and it was very special to Jack. I know that.
Right. Another Thanksgiving game, Coach, and it was played on a Saturday because, or actually, it might have been played on a Sunday because of it snowed on Thanksgiving. It was 1989. You know, you're the big championship Ansonia team, and they played Naugatuck. I believe the game was in Naugatuck, and you guys pulled out a 14-7 win. But that game was very tight for the entire game. I mean, Naugatuck came out. Really had a great defensive game plan. And I mean, that was another great win for Ansonia because that was a little scary because that Ansonia team was magnificent that year. And Naugatuck really came ready to play that game.
Well, Naugatuck played it very tough and interesting enough. It was played on a Sunday, as you say, and we had been number 2 in the state at the time. And I believe Stratford Stratford was number 1 in the state. And we saw Stratford lose to Bunnell because their game was also a Thanksgiving rivalry. And that game was played on Saturday. We were down there watching it, and Stratford lost to Bunnell. So we knew we had a chance to go to number 1 in the state if we won that game. And we were behind 7-0, and then we tied it. And we moved the ball very well. We just couldn't score. And then finally, Kevin Sharkey was having a tremendous year for us, broke a run in the fourth quarter, and we went ahead 14-7. We held on, and then we went on to win the state championship against Weston the following week, and we ended up number 1 in the state after that. But the whole weekend with Stratford getting beat after we've been chasing them for the whole year, and then winning and then going on to the state title game meant an awful lot.
Right. And then another game I think of too, Coach, I believe – I could be wrong. It was either 99 or 2000, but I want to say 99. It was a very close game in Naugatuck that year that you guys pulled out. It might even went to overtime again, but I believe it was the 99 Ansonia Naugatuck game where that went right down to the wire as well.
Well, the 2000 game was the one that went overtime.
Yes, there you go. That's the one. Yeah.
And that was Derby.
Yeah.
And that was Craig Peters' last game coaching, I believe. And
yeah.
He coached 29 years in Naugatuck, and we were behind in that game. We came back and tied it, and it did go in overtime, and we won on a Craig Bahoon field goal. It was very satisfying to come back and win that game, and we had a great rivalry with all those years with Coach Peters, who was a Hall of Fame coach. He won over 200 games, but we had a pretty good run against him on Thanksgiving Day.
Yeah, definitely. And Coach, were there any games in the 70s that you coached against Naugatuck that stand out to you? Because, I mean, that's really where Ansonia kind of established themselves as one of the premier teams in the state. But were there any games that you think of in the 70s that stand out?
There's a couple of games. First of all, Naugatuck had beaten Ansonia basically, I believe, in 68, 69, 70. There might have been a tie in 71 or 70, and there might have been a tie. In 71, they won. Naugatuck had won, and we came on the staff in 72, and also Naugatuck won that game. We were playing up in Naugatuck, and it was Roger Ring's senior year, and we were ahead, and then Naugatuck tied the game with about 2 minutes to go in the game. And in those days, there was no playoff, so we were looking at a tie, and they kicked off, and Roger Rings caught the ball and ran back the kickoff for a touchdown, which also broke the state scoring record at that time. We actually stopped Naugatuck when they were driving, and we were trying to run out the clock. We broke another run. Terry Golson was a sophomore with about 30 seconds to go, and he ran another. We ended up winning by 2 touchdowns, but the kickoff return was really what won the game for us, and that had broken about a 5-game Naugatuck winning streak. So it really meant an awful lot, and then that started us on our winning streak. And 77 was a huge game because it was the first time Naugatuck and Ansonia were both undefeated going into Thanksgiving in many, many years. I don't know how many, but it was quite a few. And right before that game, Sandy Olszewski had been hurt. He came back for practice for the whole week before Naugatuck, but then a doctor would not let him play in the game, even though he had practiced and played in a scrimmage. So David Debish had to come back and be our quarterback, and It was up in Naugatuck, and we ended up winning the game 19-0. Team played just tremendous defense, and we broke a few runs. And then we got Sandy back for the state playoff when we beat Stanford Catholic at the time. But it was, again, both teams were undefeated at that time. And then in 99, Joey Potter, who was a great quarterback for us, broke the opening play for a touchdown, about a 60-yard touchdown run. And then a couple plays later, he broke his collarbone, and we had to play a young sophomore named Joey Shea for quite a part in the game, and he really did a great job. But it was just, the game of that magnitude was tough for him at that time. And we ended up being behind 14-13, and Timmy McNamara, who had only been a backup quarterback as a freshman, but he was a great receiver, great defensive back. He was inserted into the lineup with about 6 minutes to go as a quarterback and led us down the field. And between running some options, completing a couple passes, we went in and we scored about 2 minutes to go and won the game. And then Joey Shea did come back the next week as our quarterback, and we were able to win a state title with him. He did a great job.
Right.
But Timmy Mack came off the bench as more or less as the relief pitcher out of the bullpen, and he took us down. It was a tremendous comeback win for us up in Naugatuck. So those were some of the great games in the 70s.
Right. And I mean, that to me has always been a great rivalry. And I mean, I know in the last 30 years, Ansonia has really had the upper hand. I think Naugatuck has won 4 or 5 times at the most. So, I mean, you guys have really had the upper hand on them. But the games have always been played so well, a lot of them. I mean, they've been very tight games. So, I mean, there have been times it's been one-sided, but a lot of times the games have been close. And I mean, it's one of the better rivalries in Thanksgiving, I believe.
There are, and Naugatuck is always usually no worse than 7-2 or 8-1. Once or twice they have come in undefeated over the last 30 years, but even though they've lost once this year and we haven't, they're considered an equal rival right now, and the game is going to be a real tough one to win up there. And they're a very experienced team. They got some outstanding linemen and 3 great backs. They've had the one game they lost, one of their best backs was out. He's back now, and so we've got everything we can do to win this one. I can tell you that.
Right, and the thing is, too, Coach, is last year the game you played against Naugatuck was for the league title. This year it'll be for the league title as well, and I think that just adds to the rivalry. It gives it an extra element is when the league title is on the line, because you're not just playing for a rivalry, you're not just playing for Thanksgiving, you're playing for that championship. And I think that's always something special when you can do that.
Well, and both teams this year have already qualified for the state tournament, so it's not like that's hanging over either team's head. And the rivalry means a lot. I mean, winning the NBL title means a lot. I mean, we don't take it for granted. We've won it many, many times, but each year is a new year, and it means a lot to that particular class. And it means even more considering the fact that they won it last year after we had won it 10 years in a row, I believe. So we fully expect to play right down to the last seconds, and hopefully we'll come out on top.
Right. So, Coach, I always wanted to ask you this because, I mean, it fascinated me, and I thought about it the other day, and I wrote it in my notes because I said I got to make sure I ask him this. You've been up top forever. I mean, you're always up top. But are there times when the game is getting so tight, or, the moment in the game and things like that, where you wish you're on the sidelines because you probably see something that you could correct right away? I mean, do you get a little antsy being up there sometimes when you could see that game's getting to a point where it's getting a little scary or whatever?
Well, when you're on the sidelines, you have more involvement in the particular play. You're yelling to particular parties. You're either if you're sending in plays or if you're if you're coaching a particular position, or watching someone, trying to encourage them or trying to correct even from the sidelines what someone may or may not have done. And other than being on the headset, when you're up top and you're on the headset, you're somewhat limited, obviously, and because the coaches on the headsets on the field are trying to impart certain things to the players on the field. So, you can't be yelling into the headset because they're trying to get information onto the field. But it is nerve wracking up being up top. I can tell you that. But I've been very fortunate to be part of the one great program for all these years, and I look forward to being on top again, on top in the game, but certainly on top in the press box, and hopefully I can add something of some significance. You never know, but you always got to keep looking.
Right. I think high school football, with all the Thanksgiving games, it kind of starts Thanksgiving off on the right note. It gets people to do something till they go eat afterwards. They could go to a football game. One thing I've noticed, though, in the last 5 to 10 years is a lot of these teams have switched their Thanksgiving games. They started playing on Wednesday nights for whatever reason. I mean, let me ask you, I mean, does it disappoint you to see that that's happening? And I mean, how would you feel if that ever happened with Ansonia and Naugatuck?
Absolutely, I would feel heartbroken. I believe all games should be played on Thanksgiving, and no one believes it more than Tom Brockett. So, but the two of us, I mean, I still to this day still remember going to my first Derby Shelton Thanksgiving Day game in 1956, and I went to every Derby Shelton game until I started playing at Notre Dame. And when I came back from high school and I was in law school, I was either at the Notre Dame game or the Derby Shelton game. And I we'll be scouting tomorrow night for a potential playoff opponent who's they're playing on Tuesday night. I see this year for the first time a great rivalry like West Haven and Notre Dame, West Haven and Fairfield Prep have moved their game from Wednesday to Thursday to Wednesday. I mean, and Thanksgiving was such a great occasion for people to meet at the game and for college guys to come back. Not that you can't do it on Wednesday night, but it just, to me, is just not the same. Right. And I've been out scouting the last 10 years or 15 years on Wednesday night, scouting a game. And, you know, it's great to watch the game, but to me, there is absolutely nothing like Thanksgiving morning. You wake up about 6 o'clock in the morning and you know that, you know it's coming. Your stomach's in a knot, and Thanksgiving, the concept of Thanksgiving food and dinner is fine, but when you leave that house in the morning, there's nothing more important than that Thanksgiving Day game. And I've been able to do it as a coach, as a player, as a coach, and to watch my children play on Thanksgiving. They all three played all the time. I mean, they never played at Thanksgiving Eve. They always played Thanksgiving morning. One of the great disappointments is when a Thanksgiving Day game is rained out or postponed. You just feel like climbing the wall that morning.
Yeah.
I know dinner's coming, but the game is still out there. You're either going to play it the next night. Sometimes we played as late as Saturday, and that one time you mentioned in 1989 we played on Sunday. But there's absolutely still nothing like Thanksgiving Day football.
Yeah, you're 100% right. And one thing that took away from Jack Hunt's final game is he coached on a Friday night because the game got postponed. So I always felt like had he won that game on a Thursday on Thanksgiving, it would have meant that so much more that way because it was his favorite holiday. So it was always a little disappointing that he had to coach his final game on a Friday night against Naugatuck.
You're right. I agree.
Yeah, definitely. So, Coach, one of the things I wanted to do today was focus a little bit on 1983. We left off with 1982, but this 83 Ansonia football team may have been one of the best ever. I think they were number 20 in the country. I could be wrong. They were that good of a football team. You talk about the players you guys had on that team. I mean, one guy that comes to mind right away is Glennie Antrim. I mean, he ended up having some success in the NFL. He played a little bit with the New England Patriots. I mean, yeah, John Lawler, Timmy Ahern. I mean, so many great guys. Jeffrey Coppola, I think, was the quarterback. Just Earl Stanley at running back. You guys had just so many great players on that team. So talk to me a little bit before we get into the record and the games and stuff. Just talk to me about the talent on that team that year.
Well, there were a number of guys who played on a very good team the year before, which lost to Naugatuck on Thanksgiving 7-6, but beat Derby in the state finals 20-0 or so, and went 10-1 and was the state champs. But we had back people that had played for Earl Stanley was a great high school football player, running back and monster back or linebacker when he played either one or the other. He was just sometimes a man among boys. And John Lawler and Timmy Ahern were two outstanding linemen on offense and defense. John went to play at UConn. Timmy went to play at Yale. Andy Scott was also another scholarship player at UConn who played great defenses. He'd been a defensive end, but he became a linebacker that year, and he was just a beast. And certainly you mentioned Glennie, who was a safety, but also a tremendous receiver. Those were five outstanding senior high school football players who could have played with anybody. And we also had Dave McDermott, Chris Schumacher, Gigi Hotchkiss. Those were all other seniors. On defense, John Hunt was a junior defensive end, and he became an all-state tight end the next year. We had Derek Abbott, who was a outstanding fullback and linebacker. He was a senior. Ellis Ings was the other halfback in the backfield with Earl as the running back in the wishbone. And we had Jeffrey Capola, who was a sophomore quarterback, who did a tremendous job for us that year. It was tough to be a sophomore quarterback, especially in trying to run the schedule that we did. And then we had Pat Ahern was an outstanding receiver who ended up playing at Union College. And then Terry McNamara was a sophomore receiver who ended up being the player of the year in Connecticut 2 years later. And he contributed and made some key catches for us. So just in general, I thought I did mention Dave McDermott. I thought it was the other tackle. I'm trying to just cover all the guys we have. I'd hate to miss out on anybody, but that was just an exceptional high school football team.
Right. And let me ask you, Coach, this would be Coach McAllister's final season. Did he mention to you guys early in the year that this was probably it for him, or was that something he didn't discuss and just, at the end of the year, he called it a career?
He did not mention it one bit. Even it wasn't until January that he called us in that morning, and he was addressing the team about a banquet, and he announced to the team that he was retiring, and he came out of the air. We really didn't expect it, but he had been involved for so many years between Derby and Ansonia. It was a job well done, and we were stunned, but we were so happy for him.
Right. So talk to me a little bit. Coach, that team, like I said, was just unbelievable. And it's funny, they played Derby that year, and Derby was struggling a little bit. I think they were 3-2 going into the game against Ansonia, and it was Charlie's first year. And Derby really played you guys tough. But what I thought was really what said all I needed to know about this Ansonia team is even through adversity, they found a way to win, and they were up quickly, I think 13-0, and Derby came right down, tied it, but they pulled through and they got the W they needed and proved that, even when they were tested, they could still find a way to win.
Derby played great that day. They really did. They kicked our butt for a long time that day. Jeff Rice ran for about 600 yards, it seemed like, but we were ahead 13-0, and Derby did come back and go ahead. No, I'm sorry, they tied it, and thankfully for us, they did miss the second extra point, or else they would have been ahead. So it was still a tie at the time, and many people to this day wish there was instant replay, because they claim that Glennie made a great diving catch for a first down when we were still tied at 13-13. It was a third down play. We made the first down, and then 2 plays later, he went about, I'm just guessing, 40, 50 yards on a pass play for the touchdown that put us ahead, and we hung on to win. But Charlie's coaching staff, Charlie's players, they did a tremendous job that day. They gave us all we could handle. We were very fortunate enough to get out with a win, and we were very happy to move on and put that one in the rearview mirror.
Right. Now, Coach, let me ask you, the big hurdle was getting past Naugatuck. Those seniors had never beat Naugatuck, but was there any team before the Naugatuck game that gave you guys a scare at all, or was it pretty much you guys coasted till Naugy?
Nobody gave us more of a scale than Derby did. I mean, we started off, we beat Holy Cross really good. for the second year in a row, we were ahead of Shelton at halftime, 42-0.
Wow.
We were on a roll. Torrington was pretty good. We went up there and we beat them 35-7. And then, as I said, Derby really gave us more than we can handle almost. And then Naugatuck up there, it was ironic as Jeffrey Capola broke almost the exact same play that Joey Potter broke for a touchdown. He went the same way, and he scored. We went ahead 7-0, and the game ended up, I believe, we won 28-7 at the end, and it did mean a lot because we had lost 2 years in a row to Naugatuck, and we certainly needed that game to go on and chase the state championship. And then, interestingly enough, we're going to play Stanford Catholic again, who had a very good team, and we have been chasing Hand all year, and Hand was considered being blown up as the number one team in New England, just a great football team. They had a lot of great football players. Jim Bell was the player of the year, the running back. They had David Thompson, who was a great quarterback, went to BC, as did Bell. And they played East Catholic up in the state finals on Friday night, and we were playing on Saturday. And we were at the game, and it was a tremendous game. And East Catholic came from behind, and they beat Hand by 2 points. So that gave us a chance to battle with St. Joe's, who also won on Friday night. St. Joe's is undefeated. Hand was number one. They had gotten beat. Greenwich was undefeated. They were playing Notre Dame, and they beat them the next day also. But we beat Trinity Catholic 32-0 and completely dominated the game. And that was our number one ranking that we had been chasing for a decade. So, again, I mentioned how, after Derby, we finally beat Derby. That was the next thing that people were encouraging us to perhaps achieve, the fact that, okay, you got by Derby now. Why can't you be number one? So that meant an awful lot to Bill McAllister to finish his coaching career as the coach of the number one team in the state. It really meant it was a tremendous game for all of us.
Right. And Coach, one of the things, I'm glad you brought up the with the 3 undefeated teams or whatever, but one of the things that I've always felt, and it could be because I'm biased towards it, but I've always felt over the years that sometimes Derby and Ansonia got, the short end of the stick because they had some great teams. And I felt like I don't want to say like an anti-Valley or anything like that, but I just felt like there were times both Derby and Ansonia deserved to be number one. And many times they were, pushed aside for another team who wasn't quite that good. Because I could think of Danbury in 1990 had 2 ties. Derby wins on Thanksgiving. West Haven knocks off St. Joe's, and you would think, and you guys knocked off Naugatuck, and you would think Derby's going to be number one. And they put Danbury there with 2 ties. Derby eventually beats Housatonic. Greenwich knocks off Danbury, so Derby gets number one. But I just felt like, there was no respect there. And then I think about some of your teams. I especially think about the 2002 and 2003 Ansonia teams, and even the 94 and 95 Ansonia teams, because somewhere in those 4 teams, there should have been a number one rank in there.
Well, especially, 2003, we were number one, and New Britain went up and beat Xaverian in Massachusetts, which is a great team. They did beat Xaverian 42-0, and they jumped us slightly. And we ended up with 1 less first place vote than they did in the final poll, even though I thought we outplayed them the whole year. But and to show you how things changed, the next year they played Xaverian again. This time Xaverian beat them 42-0, and that ended up with Hand being number one. So we had those teams in 2002 to 2003, especially because the team was a year older in 2003, and certainly in 94 and 95, those teams could have played with anybody in the state day in and day out. They were if not number one, they were as good as anybody, no doubt in many people's minds.
Right. So let me ask you, Coach, you guys knock off Naugatuck, you win 28-7. Was the confidence with the coaching staff and the players that we did what we had to do, we're going to win this state title game and we're going to get this number one ranking?
We had tremendous respect from Trinity Catholic. You saw they were huge. We were big. We were fairly big, but not as big as they were. they had lost to Greenwich by a touchdown or two, and they were 9-1 in the FCAC, which was always considered the best league in the state. We really thought it was going to be a barn burner, and we went down and got the first touchdown, and then Derek Abbas made a one-handed interception and ran back about 60 yards through everybody. It was one of the great plays I've ever seen at Ansonia High School. And then he broke a 35, 40-yard run for a touchdown, and we scored one more before the half. We went in at halftime against Trinity Catholic. We were up 26-0, and they didn't make a first down, I believe, in the whole first half. We just played unbelievably defense. The second half, we more or less just sat on the lead. We knew we weren't going to give it away, and we scored once more. But we played such great defense. I mean, they didn't come close to scoring. If they got past the 40, it would have been unusual. So we knew that game was pretty well in hand at halftime. Yeah.
Right. And let me ask you, I mean, were you confident when you guys got on that bus that you were going to be number one after that game, or did you still get nervous that Monday wondering if you guys were going to be?
We thought that the way we played, it would have been tough to take us down because we were number 2 going in behind hand. So we were fairly confident. But until that vote came in for the first time, we didn't trust anybody because we had lost out a couple of times. We really thought we should have won. So we were very happy when the final vote was announced.
And coaching those players, Coach, you coached them as freshmen, and then you saw a lot of them get to play as sophomores. You know, so many of them started as sophomores, and then, of course, you had a bunch of them start their junior year. How happy were you for those players? And also, how happy were you for Coach McAllister knowing that these guys were able to experience number one?
I was very happy for the players, obviously, but having been with Coach McAllister through the tough days of 90, of 72, 73, 74, and then, whatchamacallit? Excuse me, Mike, let me just take a little.
Yeah.
And then to see him really finally be held in the esteem that he greatly deserved meant so much to Dell, myself, Jack, Bobby, everyone who had been with him since 72, 73. So we were just so happy for him. He really was a great high school football coach, and in his last 8 years, he went 85-4.
Yeah.
And won 6 state championships in 8 years. So that's a pretty good record for anybody.
Right. Absolutely. And one of the things Charlie DeCenzo told me, Coach, is when they were shocked when Coach DiFilippo announced he was leaving, and he had said how Frank Alou said to him, "What are we going to do?" And Charlie's like, we'll talk to him at lunch. We'll talk him out of it. Let me ask you, did any of you guys try to talk Coach McAllister out of retiring, or did you just know there was no way?
Once he said that, he wrote the letter, called the newspapers. He wasn't coming back, and he went up to a coaching convention that night, and he was up there with Bobby, and Jack and I drove up, and we just said we were 100% in favor. The whole staff was that Bobby Lisi was going to be the next coach. We didn't want anybody coming in from outside. We had all coached together, and there was unanimity between the 4 of us, and Bill McAllister, of course, wanted Bobby to become the coach. Some people in town wanted to open it up to see who else might apply, but unanimously, we all backed Bobby. We made it known to anybody that it was Bobby's job, and that's what it turned out to be.
Right. And Coach, the other thing that's very interesting is Coach McAllister, I think, was only maybe 43 or 44 years old. So nowadays, I mean, some guys are just getting a head coaching job at that age. So it was kind of unique that he retired so young. But, he also he coached at Yale, I believe, and then he eventually became a principal at the school. So, I mean, he had other plans as well. It wasn't like he was just retiring fully.
Well, if you can even believe this, for a couple of years, after he got done coaching at Yale, he came back and just helped out at Ansonia coaching, helped like an unpaid assistant with the freshman team that I was. And it was great to have him around. He was just great. I wish he stayed and did it more, but he was just a great man to have with you. He had no involvement with the varsity. He didn't want to even do that at all, but he wanted to just be help out with the freshmen.
Yeah, I mean, just a great guy. I mean, had him on, and he was wonderful. So, Coach, before we go, I mean, you guys have a tough one Thursday, obviously, but I mean, does it make you happy to see, though, that like this Ansonia-Naugatuck rivalry seems to be back now? It seems like, to me, this is going to be the best game in the state on Thursday. And again, I love the Valley, so I guess I'm biased, but I really believe that when these two teams are at their best, there's no better rivalry on Thanksgiving.
Well, I agree with you. I mean, it's unfortunate. I mean, Derby Shelton was a special rivalry. I said,
Yeah.
I cut my teeth as a Thanksgiving football fan on Derby Shelton. I wouldn't miss it, even though then when I went to Notre Dame, obviously that changed it. But I still remember when Derby upset Shelton in 1957. It was the first time Derby had won in about 7-8 years. I mean, the place just went out. It was in Derby. The place went absolutely crazy. And I was a 10-year-old kid, and I thought I was at the Super Bowl. But now, I mean, unfortunately, that rivalry has seen its day. And I wish Shelton the best against Xavier, and I wish Derby, and I hope Derby and Oxford have a great rivalry. But the Ansonia-Naugatuck rivalry is on a higher scale, obviously, and we certainly are pleased to be part of it.
Right. Well, Coach, thank you again for coming on. Best of luck on Thursday. I know there'll be butterflies, but I got to believe it'll be a great game between two great teams, and it'll be great for high school football. But I look forward to this. And then next time we have you back, we'll have a pretty good idea of how your season finished. And we'll also get into 1984 and 85, two great years of Ansonia football as well. So thank you again for doing this.
Mike, it's always great to speak with you, and have a happy Thanksgiving.
You as well. Thank you, Coach.
Bye, Mike.
And of course, folks, that's the one and only John Sponheimer. I'm Mike Kenichi. This was Spooney Scrapbook saying good night, everyone.